All right, so here we are continuing into chapter 3. This is 3.3. This is truth tables for the conditional and the biconditional. We saw conditional and biconditional back on lesson 3.1. They were just introduced. Remember, conditional is the arrow, and that's an if-then statement. And biconditional is the double arrow, and that is if-only-if statements, okay? All right, so the first one we're going to look at here is the conditional, okay? So we have our P values there, we have our Q values there, okay? So if P, then Q. Notice that when they're both true, it's true. When P is true and Q is false, then if P, then Q is false as well, okay? And then notice if P is false and then Q is true, then both of them combined is a true statement. And then if they are both false, then that combines to be a true statement, okay? So, down there in the bottom, that sentence down there at the bottom is the key statement, the conditional statement. P, if P, then Q is true in every case except when P is a true statement and Q is a false statement. All right, let's look at our biconditional. This is the biconditional. This is the double arrow one. Okay, so our P and our Q values all stay the same, but when we combine them, notice that they are only true when P and Q are the same value. Okay, so when P and Q are true, if and only if is also true. Okay, and when they're both false, that's also true. But when they have different values, like true, false, or false, true, that makes it a false statement. All right, let's get into some examples here. Okay, all right, so we're going to construct a truth table for the statement. So, if in, then all of this must be true in the parentheses, okay? So the parentheses is important too. So this is if M, then not in, okay? So again, I mentioned in a previous lecture video to always make sure you take care of the negations and the parentheses first. Okay, so if you'll notice down here on my truth table, they have us taking the negation of n first, okay? So the negation of n, again, that's just going to be the opposite of n there, okay? So number 1, that should be false. Number 4, that would be true. Number 7, that would be false. And number 10, that will be true. All right, so if m, then the negation of n, okay? So we're not interested in just n. We're comparing here, okay? Right here, this statement right here, we're comparing these two right here. This and this, okay? All right, so if m, then the negation of n, okay? So true, then false, okay? If true, then false. Well, that always results in a false statement, okay? Again, I can prove it up here. If I go back up here to my chart, the only time it's a false statement is when your first one is true and your second one is false. Okay? Other than that, everything else is true, okay, on a conditional. All right, going back down. All right, number 5 here. If m, which is true, then the negation of n is true. So true and true, that means this is true. Okay? Number 8 here. Okay? If m is false and the negation of n is false, then number 8 will be true. Okay? And then the last one there, if m is false, then the negation of n is true. This is also a true statement. Okay? All right, now let's put them all together. Now we are interested in n here, okay? So again, let me pick a different color here, okay? So now we are comparing n, which is right here. Okay, I'm doing this in green. And what we did in parentheses is what we did right here. Okay, so we only need to compare those two columns, the ones that I highlighted there, okay? So in other words, I'm going to go ahead and grab a highlighter here, and I'm going to go ahead and highlight the whole thing in green, okay? Because my last 4 blanks right here, I'm comparing these two columns right here. All right, so if n is true, then that statement in parentheses was false. So if true, then false. That's the only way to get a false statement on a conditional statement, okay? On a conditional truth table. All right, number 6. If false, then true. That would be true. Okay? Number 9. If true, then true. Well, that's true. And the last one, if false, then true. That is also true. Okay? So again, just like what we did on 3-2, make sure that you copy down those earlier two tables, okay, for conditional and biconditional, because they will be a lifesaver when you're working through these problems in MyLab. All right, example number 2. All right, notice we're doing another conditional statement this time. We have not you. Zoom in just a hair there. Okay, we have not you. We also have another set of parentheses. This is S and T. Okay, S and T. Okay, and then we have our combined statement there on the very end. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and work on that first column there, the not you. Not you, so that's everything opposite of you. So number 1 will be false, 4 will be true, 7 will be false, 10 will be true, 13 will be false, 16 will be true, 19 will be false, and 22 will be true. All right, now let's go ahead and work on S and T. S and T, okay? So that's comparing these two right down here, okay? S and T, okay? Now, remember, both have to be true for it to result in a true statement, okay? So S and T, so true and true, that means true. True and true, that also means true. True and false, that is false. True and false, that's false. False and true, that's false. False and true, that's false. False and false, that's definitely false. And false is false. Now, don't get that confused with or, because remember, or can have a true in either one, okay? Either S or T can be true, and it makes the whole thing true, okay? And both of them have to be true for the whole thing to be true. All right, now, let's look at what we're doing here in this last column, okay? All right, we first need not you. That's what we did right here, okay? So I'm trying to really stress to you that these build on each other, okay? So if you will work column by column, it'll make the last column extremely easy, okay? And notice we're comparing with a conditional statement, okay? If this occurs, then that means this occurs, okay? So again, it's a conditional statement. All right, so number 3, we're doing if false, then true. That's a true statement. Number 6, if true, then true. That is true. Next one down, number 9. If false, then false. That's true. Number 12, if true, then false. That is false. That's the only time you can get a false result there in a conditional statement, when the first one is true and the second one is false. Okay, number 15. If false, then false. That's true. Okay. Number 18. If true, then false. That is false. There's our other false right there. Number 21. If false, then false. That's true. And last one. If true, then false. That is false. Okay. So again, we had, based on the definition of conditional there, we have 3 there that result in false results, okay? Extremely important there. All the rest of them will be true. All right, next one down. Example number 3. Now we are going to start doing biconditional. Now remember, biconditional, they have to have the same result, okay? M and N have to have the same result for the whole statement to be a true statement, okay? All right, now, what's kind of interesting about this is you notice this right here is M, and this is also M. So it's kind of interesting. Why did they duplicate it here? Okay. All right. So all we need to do in this column right here is we just need to copy those values. So true, true, false, and false. That's pretty easy because we're just copying the tables from that first column. Okay. Now we're going to do not in. So not in, again, opposite from that column right there. So false, true, false, and true. There we go. All right, so now let's do our conditional statement, which, notice what we're comparing here. We're comparing this column And maybe that's why they duplicated it, but just to move it over to make sure that it's right next to the negation of n. Okay, so we're comparing this column with this column to complete this chart. So number 3, we say if t, only if f. That sounds funny. True and false, true and false. If they're opposite statements, that's going to make the biconditional statement false, okay? Number 4 and 5 are both true. That makes 6 true. Number 7 and 8 are both false. That makes number 9 true. And number 10 is false and number 11 is true. That makes number 12 false. Again, that is based on the instructions that they gave us about biconditional, okay? The rules for biconditional statements. All right. Next example, example number 4, we start getting a little bit more complicated here, okay? Now, we are starting to integrate or and into these as well. So notice that we're going to do those first. We don't see any negation here, okay, which is nice. But we have to take care of those parentheses first, okay? So first thing we're going to do is take care of x or y. X or y. So number 1, x or y, if it's true and true, that makes it true. If it's true or false, that's true. If it's false or true, that's true. And then if it's false or false, that is when it's false. Okay? Next column is my and. Okay? Don't forget these were the ones that were in parentheses for us. X and y. So true and true results in true. True and false results in false. False and true results in false. And false and false results in false. Alright, now this makes it extremely easy in that last column because, again, we're comparing this column with this column, okay? So extremely important, okay? And again, this is biconditional. So as long as they are the same result, that always turns into a true statement, okay? So here we see 1 is true, 2 is true, that makes 3 true, okay? 4 is true, 5 is false. Well, if they are opposite values, that makes this false. Number 7 is true, 8 is false, number 9 is going to be false. Okay, number 10 is false, number 11 is false, that makes number 12 true. Okay? A lot of students have always told me in the past that they like conditional and biconditional. The only thing is you have to get those rules down. And once you get the rules down, it is extremely easy. Alright, that is our last example. So that completes section 3.3. Again, if you get stuck or anything like that, don't be afraid to hit that send to the instructor in MyLab, or either that or pick up your phone, snap a picture, attach it to an email, and put IDK in the subject. You don't have to type anything else and just hit send, and as soon as I get that, I will shoot a video.